A story from my youth. This one has no lesson to be learned or message to be gleaned. Often my father liked to take me on hunts in the forested lands east of Avaldsnes. I loved these solitary times with him. I had never felled a beast myself, and my father saw that this upset me. I was only a boy, but I had the dreams of being a man. So one winter, my father asked me to perform a bargaining ritual to the goddess Skadi to improve his bow skill and snow sight. With glee warming my heart, I cut a hair and sacrificed it to the goddess, asking in exchange of skill and sight for my father. When the ritual was done, my father and I set off into the forest. We hunted all day until night fell, and we slew no game. That night, around the fire, I was sullen. My sacrifice had not been heeded, yet seeing my sad face, my father only smiled. Had you been hunting, he said, you would have killed 6 fine deer. For Skadi, hears only those who speak to her. Yeah! When I was 11 winters old, I was the youngest of my favorite cousins. A wild and rowdy bunch of boys and girls. Together with our parents, we attended a feast at the home of Halfdan the Black of the House of Yngling. To toughen our patience, our parents set us with the old woman, who ordered us to bake flatbreads and serve it to the noble jarls. After an hour, the flatbreads piled so high into pillars, you could have built a roof over it and called it a longhouse. When our work was done, an older boy, Guthrod, suggested we steal a keg of mead and drown in happiness for our good work. So Guthrod, Mikkel and Åsa snuck into the storeroom and stole a barrel as I stood watch. But when we were spotted, I froze. 3 of Harald's men stopped us. They struck Guthrod and Mikkel and pushed Åsa to the ground. Whose idea was this? They asked. I stood and said, the idea was mine. The meat is for me. One of the men eyed me and said only, that is not true. Then, they moved on.
We need an epic tale.
Some time ago, I met a wandering skald in search of a jarl or king to serve. He had not composed a verse in years, and was fearful of losing his skill. I said I knew many such great men, a few jarls, a handful of kings by name. But to my knowledge, all of them had many skalds of their own. This poor skald was disappointed and thanked me for my time, asking my name as he departed. Dag Nithison, I told him. The skald's eyes went wide. Dag Nithison, he exclaimed. Of Fornburg? I nodded and said, the very man I am. The poor skald sung to the skies with joy. You are a legend among legends, he said. Let me compose a verse for you, if I may. Imagine my surprise at hearing such praise. But I agreed. So he began for 2 days composing a most lovely verse on my behalf. Yes, a most lovely verse. Unforgettable, yes. And I will recite it for you one day, when we have time.
You salt skulls, got a story?
I knew a crazed man about my age called Rokur. We had taken to calling Rokur the rodent for his habit of collecting axes. For 20 years he collected axes of all make and size. He had never seen a day of battle, but he swore to Thor that he would. In his 31st year, after drinking too much ale, Rokur seduced another man's wife. That man called a holmgang against Rokur. Rokur accepted the holmgang, and on the agreed-upon day, he laid out 12 of his axes and asked, which of these will I use to slay you? Will it be Bone Splitter? He said. My bearded blade inscribed with Seidr runes, affixed to a handle of English oak? Or Blood Fountain, he continued. My Dane axe, which swings through the air on 2 hands with the speed of an arrow's flight. Or might it be Twin Wolf Wounder? Rokur growled, growing even more bold. A fierce pair of throwing axes. At that moment, the man who had challenged Rokur brought a large stone down upon his head. Rokur died instantly, and his axes were given away as gifts.
Is there a sea scald among you?
Here's a tale I do not often tell. There was a clan, little known in the south, composed entirely of warrior women. And
Why you did not stay with them when they asked you to be the king, dog, I will never understand.
Who will share a tale?
During my 19th winter, King Styrbjörn ordered the construction of a new longhouse. The splendid hall you now see at Fornburg. To build this longhouse, he employed the help of 20 men. I was among them, as was Fradi, the strongest and stoutest man I had ever seen. We set about felling trees and hewing wood for timber. Fradi was the fastest of us, dropping 41 trees in only 2 days. On the third day, a spindly man called Nar was near upon felling his first tree. He had hacked it all the way around like some mad animal. When the tree fell, it did so in a direction he had not wished. Straight down upon Fradi. Nar called out, but it was too late. Fradi had only enough time to turn and face the doom bearing down upon him. With that, he raised his arms to embrace the timber hammer. The force of the trees falling drove Fradi deep into the snowbank, yet his arms never let go. He held that angry trunk as a lover. Like hounds, we scooped at the snow to reach him. We found Fradi 10 feet down, alive but in pain, still bearing the tree upon his shoulder.
Let's hear a story.
Have I ever told you the story about...
I am fairly certain you have. Anyone else with a tale to share before Dag starts talking again? We need an epic tale.
In my youth, I remember hearing the story of Kalda, a fierce young woman whose father forbade her from swordplay and raids. Kalda had skills to match or surpass any man in the clan. And so it was that her beloved Gapi asked her aboard his ship. Once again, Kalda's father forbade her to leave, calling her soft and weak and fragile. But Kalda ignored these insults and left. For a full spring, Kalda and Gapi sailed the coast of Francia, raiding and plundering and taking much silver and riches. Then, in the early weeks of summer, a passing ship gave Kalda the news that her mother had died suddenly. Kalda was grief-stricken. Kalda returned quickly home, only to find her mother there, alive and standing quietly beside her father. Kalda was confused. Kalda's father spoke with a sour voice. I sent a tale of your mother's death, for you were insolent. But now you are home, where you must stay. Hearing these words, Kalda pulsed hot with rage. She slew her father and fled back to her ship, then set a swift sail for the horizon.
You salt skulls, got a story?
You may not know this, but Ragnar Lothbrok once asked me to lead his early assault on England myself. This would have been 8, maybe 10 years back. It's hard to say. The winters blow into one another like a great white fog. But I remember as if it were yesterday. Ragnar appeared at my home unannounced. Naturally, I welcomed him. He had traveled a great distance only to see me. So I poured him ale and fed him bread and listened as he talked. He was feeling anxious about his journey, leading so many men into such a great war. It was a burden he could not handle. It was then, with tears wetting his lids, that he said, "Dag, teach me the art of war. Lead us to England and to victory." But I shook my head. "Ragnar," I told him, "I have 2 weddings I must attend soon. Were it not for these, surely I would help you." Ragnar bowed his head. "Thank you, Dag," he said. "Though you will not be on my ship, You will be present in spirit, and that is enough.
Is there a sea scald among you?
Some years ago, I took to sea with a sword dancer called Egil. A brooding warrior with a face of stone and oak-hard arms. On a raid in Courland, we shored up along the edge of a forest and explored until we came to People Parts, a large farm. It was night, and all were asleep. So we set about plundering the place in the quiet of eve, taking sheep and goats as we pleased. It was then that Egil saw a farmhand and pressed the boy for the family's hidden silver. The farmhand squawked like a crow. Being hid beneath an anvil at the smith's forge, the silver was no trouble to lift. In secret, we took it and the boy back to the ship. It was then that Egil grew sad, for when the farmers woke with the crack of day, they would know they had been robbed, but not by whom. So Egil ordered 3 of us to follow him back to the sleep-hushed hamlet. As we burnt the houses, Egil shouted his name. I am Egil, son of Skatlagrim, and I am the man who deprives you of everything but your life. I never sailed with Egil again.
We all remember when Eivor gave orders to attack Kjotve's clan in Avaldsnes. I knew even then our chance at victory was slim. It was a fool's errand. But Eivor demanded we strike, and I am not one to disobey my superior. Such is the mark of an honorable man. You all know what followed. We set upon Kjotve's men and were overwhelmed. You lot were captured and fit to be butchered, and Eivor here, carried off to be sold into slavery. A fate worse than a fine death. But there is one fact you do not know. In the initial fight, I came upon Kjotve, cowering in an empty house. He did not see me, and I came within 2 arms lengths of him. I could have slain him! A fast stroke of my axe, ending our troubles. But I held back. Why? Because I remembered my oath to Eivor. Yes, years ago, Eivor had staked a claim on Kjotve's life. So I left the back route alone. Yes.
A pity, Dag. There's no one living who can verify this incredible tale. Who will share a tale?
Here is a story I have not told a man, for it happened only last month. I was sharing a mead horn with a beautiful woman. When she,
her sisters, and her mother all begged for your hand in marriage. Is that how this tale ends?
Yes. Were you there?
In the early days of the feud between Kjotve the Cruel and the Raven clan, there was a mad berserker called Kiar Robo. Kiar had pledged his battle fury to no king or jarl, and would give his oath only once each winter, for reasons nobody could fathom. One year, Kiar's sister Thora was married to Kjotve's brother Alrik, and soon Kiar was often seen in the company of that clan. But soon after, word came to Kiar that Alrik had abused his sister. When he asked Thora about this, she told him, it is true. So Kiar invited Alrik on a hunting expedition. When they were away, Kiar slew Alrik and pulled off one of his arms. When he returned to camp, Kjotve asked where his brother was. Kiar shook his head and held out his hand, in which was an arm ring. Your brother bid me give you this ring, Kjotve. Confused, Kjotve took the ring, and with it came the entire bloody arm. Your brother pledged his oath to Hel herself, Kiar laughed. Then he turned and departed. He was never seen in those parts again.
Oh, you have likely never heard the story of the time Odin and Freya appeared before me on a dark winter's night. They
called you their orphan child, yes, Dag. We've heard the tale as often as the sun has risen and set. There was a woman called Nal, who came by ship to Fornburg unheralded, demanding to meet King Sigvaldi, Styrbjorn's father. Nal was from Gautland. She was tall and rugged and strong, and everyone who walked near her said she smelled of men's blood. When her message was sent to our king, Nal was made to wait a full day. Yet she did not complain. She watched the waves and sang songs. Night came and went, and still Nal sat by the shore of the fjord singing her songs. She skipped rocks with children and smiled. As the afternoon of the second day approached, King Sigvaldi's messenger reappeared. They spoke quietly together. At last, the messenger stood back and waved to some men nearby. 3 men bearing 3 chests of silver approached quickly. They set the chests of silver in Nal's ship and stood back. Then Nal stepped forward, swinging a large, bloodied sack before her. Nal opened the sack and emptied it on the shore. 7 pairs of hands tumbled to the ground. Nal then mounted her ship and sailed away.
We need an epic tale.
Not long before leaving for England, I made a solitary trek into the mountains east of Thornburg. I was looking for elk or deer or other game to bring home. But my luck was poor, and I could find nothing worth my arrows. Coming up over a rise, I saw a rounded mountain ahead of me, with a strange narrow slit in the earth, running left to right. There appeared to be fresh water in this crevasse, which was strange, for it was on its side. As I approached, the ground rumbled and the crevasse shuddered. Then it opened, as wide as a lake and ringed with color. Stepping back to take in the view, I realized with a shock what I was seeing. The Eye of Jormungandr, the world serpent. Yes, he sleeps near old Thornburg, blessing us with his dreams. Oh, if we could return there now, I would show you the place. One day, maybe. One day I will show you the place.
Let's hear a story.
Here's a tale to tickle your sides. The winter before, I was drinking in Stavanger with some companions. With us in the mead hall were men of Bard Jarl's clan, one of which was a poet named Halli, called Sarcastic Halli by most. 7 ale horns into his night, Halli stood upon his table and called across the room to another man, a skald named Tjodolf. "Tjodolf!" he yelled. "I can compose a more beautiful poem with my belching than you could with your tongue and fine words." The room laughed, Tjodolf loudest of all. "I accept your challenge, Sarcastic Halli," he shouted. "Allow me to begin." Tjodolf then spoke this verse. "Sad Halli drowns in horns of hubris, squeaking like a stoat, yet proudly the pup calls it poetry." The room laughed again, with Halli joining in. Then, Halli tripped across the room and opened his mouth to speak his verse. From his throat erupted a jet of vomit into Tjodolf's face. His only composition that night, of which he seemed most proud.
Is there a sea skald among you?
You might not be aware, but I am a man with considerable shipbuilding craft. In my youth, just 13 winters old, I designed an improvement to our dragon boats. One that gave them extra strength. It is so common now that none remember my genius design. But at the time, I was praised from the top to the bottom of Norway. I had been out sailing with my father when we hit a rough patch of ocean. Our boat trembled like a frozen skeleton. We nearly broke to pieces, but I was not afraid. I was transfixed by the ship itself, watching it bulge and heave. As men screamed around me, I devised improvements to keep the hull solid and shapely. When we returned to port, the men vomiting and weeping around me, I shared my ideas with my Jarl. He thanked me well. In time, all our ships used my new design, and soon all of Norway. So you may thank me, not the gods, for our smooth passage here.
Who will share a tale?
Unar the Ugly was an excellent sailor who could pilot a longship entirely on his own. This is why King Sigvaldi kept him around. In all other matters, Unar was a cruel, anxious and humorless man. He was one of the most unlikable people I have ever known. One year, I recall we had invited some Carls from the Yngling clan to dine with us. As we were serving ale, we came to find that we had none left. It so happened that the ale had run out just before reaching Unar's hall. This raised in him a word storm, and he accused Sigvaldi of treachery. Every man in the longhouse jeered at Unar for raising such a fuss. This made Unar angrier than before, and he stormed out. A short time later, we heard him yelling through the door of the hall. I set this scorn pole upon the men of Yngling for their dishonor! We looked outside and saw that Unar had severed one of the heads of the Yngling's horses and stuck it upon a hazel branch. When he saw us gathering at the door, the Yngling Carls among us, Unar panicked and ran. He was not seen for many months.
You salt skulls, got a story?
Did I ever tell you all the story of how I killed an entire clan single-handedly with the broken hilt of a sword?
Too often, dog. More times than any man can count.